We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. Tyler Durden.
Welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. In today's video, we are going to be discussing an important concept in economics which is surprisingly heterodox despite its explanatory power. It also greatly relates to the issue of social class in the United States. And this idea that I am going to be discussing is known as the Duesenberry Effect, which also has the name of the relative income hypothesis. The core idea behind the Duesenberry Effect is people's consumption decisions are not directly tied to their income, and not even by their relative income, but they are driven by their past income levels. The fundamental thing here is that, say you were born in a upper middle class or a wealthy family, you're used to living in a house of a certain cost, hiring cleaning staff and other people to help you at a certain cost, drive a certain level of car, send your children to a certain level of schools, super high-end cuts of meat for dinner, etc. Let's say your business, that's the primary source of income, gets disrupted by AI and your income drops by 90%. You either did not save up enough to make the difference, or with your savings you do have, it just cannot really maintain that previous level of lifestyle. If economics was based on people being as rational actors as commonly portrayed, this person would downsize their lifestyle by the income drop they receive. So if they lose 90% of their income, they would cut their spending by 90% and reduce any lifestyle habits needed to get there to be sustainable. The problem really is this is not how it works in real life. The Duesenberry effect is that people will maintain their spending at the elevated level as long as possible, even if it is not economically rational. So say, for example, instead of this person selling their house and driving a simpler car, eating eating cheaper food, and sending their kids to public school, what they would do instead is just take on debt to maintain their appearances, or cut in more minor or other aspects to keep up their previous living standard, or be willing to take more financial risks. Say, like, in order to catch up, they may use their remaining nest egg in more speculative investments to get, hopefully, the returns that can create income to compensate for their loss elsewhere. But they'll basically try to do anything within their power, usually in ways that are detrimental to their personal finances, to maintain a previous lifestyle that they can no longer afford. And they will drag this out as long as possible until ultimately the debts come due and it becomes a more giant drop-off at that point. Why does this happen? Well, there are two key mechanisms. One is the demonstration effect, or social comparison. If you grew up and live in a neighborhood of higher income people, you want to emulate and keep the consumption patterns of your friends, neighbors, or your family members at that income level. Like, say, for example, this business owner who's lost most of his income used to go on ski trips to Switzerland every year with his friends. Now he can't afford to do that, and by not going, that is a social and economic signal saying, I can no longer afford to be in your club. The level of embarrassment has this guy put the vacation on his credit card instead of declining the vacation, which he really should be doing. And that's kind of the social pressure is what drives this. And also status competition games to a certain extent. They're afraid, like, if they can't keep up with their peer groups, they'll maybe lose their friends, or their family won't stick around, or they'll have to move to a place where everybody else is in a social class that they cannot relate to, even if their income has dropped to the level of such a lower social class. The second one is a ratchet effect, which is a habit persistence. It's like once a person's standard of living rises, it's hard to cut back, even if income falls. Consumption does not decrease proportionally when income declines. Habits are sticky. And I've seen this in my own life. I grew up in a city that is very wealthy, but is also a very high divorce rate. And a lot of people who do get divorced can no longer maintain the lifestyle they had when they were previously married, because now instead of having to pay for one household, they have the expenses now of two households, no matter where the income is coming from. As a result, because of higher costs in general of having two separate households or relying on one income versus two, maintaining the standard of living that you had previously becomes more difficult or unsustainable. It's not just divorces, other examples too. Like a lot of people work in very volatile industries, or they have businesses that get disrupted, or they had bad spending habits and the bad spending habits eliminated their nest egg or eroded their previous source of capital. The savings rate will drop. The consumption habits will stay the same. Instead of like assuming people are economically rational, but the opposite. The savings rate would be constant, but consumption would drop with income. And there's other effects. One, like generally in economic recessions, consumption does not drop as much as investment, that like, or what would be implied, or what a classical model would predict. Like again, people in hard times will try to keep up appearances or their old lifestyle because it's very difficult to cut. It also explains why inequality can drive higher consumption and lower aggregate savings. So if you had a society where people were accustomed to a certain lifestyle that's associated with the class of their birth, but due to economic changes, the class of their birth has shrunk, people will try to maintain appearances and spend at that level because that's what they're used to and they think that's what a normal life is, even if their income can no longer justify it. Those are some of the implications of the Duesenberry effect. And what it comes to from the social and class thing, it is one of the biggest destroyers of wealth, because a lot of people are adopted to a certain living standard, but especially in heirs of old money people. But let's just say like the amount of money that's generated from their investments and their trust after the matriarch or the patriarch who founded the family business is dead, and the money is diversified and there's no longer the same level of income as previously, whether due to investments underperforming or the cost of living of their luxury items due to new money bids being higher than they used to be, people will spend above their sustainable withdrawal rate to keep up their lifestyles. Maybe for a little while you can be fine, especially if your income eventually recovers to sustainability. The problem is if you do that in the long run, it eventually leads to economic ruin, because years of this will either erode your nest egg or, if it's already gone, get you into levels of debt that cannot be paid back. As a result, it causes at the end to basically prevent a slow decline to a lower class level or lower income level of lifestyle. Keeping up the lifestyle for longer than you sustainably can will eventually lead to an even bigger drop in wealth and social class than if you just moved down to the sustainable level more quickly. That's why I mentioned in my video about why rich families lose their wealth that Duesenberry effect is ranked fairly high as one of the reasons this happens. In real life, it's very difficult if you've ever had to experience this. So the lesson to be learned from all this is, if you are on the ascent, like if you're a younger person, your income is growing, be slow for lifestyle inflation. I'm not saying live like a college student for the rest of your life, because that is unsustainable, and too much austerity is very demoralizing eventually. But you need to be slow with the lifestyle inflation and only add things to your lifestyle if you know with a very high degree of confidence that you'll never be in a situation that you'll have to cut that back. A good example of this would be living in a smaller apartment versus a bigger apartment. Your income goes up. The first thing you do, I'm going to get a bigger apartment, or I'm going to move closer to the beach. At the same time, your rents are going to go up significantly by doing that. Is the income at your job sustainable in the sense that you're going to pretty sure that it's going to be stable, that you can maintain that increased lifestyle without a meaningful decline in your savings rate? Or is your income more volatile based on closing sales or having a good P&L or some other more economically sensitive force, so that if times don't do well, you're going to be ratcheted up at a certain quality of life? And as people get older in general, people get more used to certain comforts, or if they grew up in a certain social background, they're more entitled to believe that they deserve a certain level of consumption and living standards. And it's just very difficult to move down. People have a hard time adjusting to it from a psychological level. I've seen this happen to several people in my own life. It's just that they can't do it, or they can do it. It just takes a long time. The lengthening of them trying to preserve this lifestyle longer than they should ultimately ends up with them in a worse financial situation than they would if they adapted quicker. But the easier way to avoid this problem is to simply not ratchet higher as quickly as you can. You need to be slow to ratchet up. And so as a result, if you do have the down times to come and you don't ratchet up as quickly with your lifestyle, you can weather it. You can keep your base lifestyle in the down times without being stuck in the Duesenberry trap. It's more about slowly having lifestyle gains so that in downtimes you can preserve your existing lifestyle without having to make massive cuts or feel deprived. If you're used to, for example, eating filet mignons every week, and now you have a budget that you can only eat chicken every week, you're going to feel like your life is miserable and you're becoming poor, and you're just not used to it. And food is just a much more trivial example, but other things is like, I can't only drive a luxury car. I'm at a certain age and level in my career, but you lose your job and it's not sustainable to drive that car anymore. You can't get a job that employs you at a salary within 30% of your old salary. It's going to be tough. You're going to feel like, I can't move down to driving the lower car, or I can't move to the town that is more affordable because it's associated with being prole, or I don't feel comfortable. I can't relate to these people because I've built a lifestyle based on living in a different kind of community. So the key thing is that I do recommend people to enjoy their life and upgrade their lifestyles when they can afford it, but not that they need to be slow to do it. And their definition of affording it should be a much higher level of income than what is generally perceived by society. A common thing that we help clients with at Spearhead is figure out how to avoid this Duesenberry trap. We go into their financial profile and figure out what money they're taking in, how much assets they have, do they need to live off their existing assets, and if they don't, how much they can save into their investments to create a bigger nest egg to have a more comfortable path to financial freedom. By going through this line by line and analyzing their budget and spending, we could figure out what are things that actually they need and improve the quality of life versus behavior that they've kind of maintained for Duesenberry Effect type motivations. And to help people avoid this Duesenberry trap can keep not only individual wealth and individual savings higher, but also help maintain family wealth across the generation. What do you think about Duesenberry Effect? Have you ever struggled to downsize your lifestyle or downgrade when you lost a job or had some other life event that lowered your income? And have you ever dealt with the other way around? Like, say your income went up, but for maybe an unsustainable reason, have you felt the temptation to ratchet up your lifestyle without being assured that you can keep it? I'd love to hear your comments on this, and if you've ever heard of the Duesenberry Effect before, because I think it's really something that should be discussed more in economics that really isn't. Thank you, everybody, for watching.